How I roll.
You're good, brother. All
Let's
right.
start going.
That's it. What's going on, you guys? Blaise here at the Blue Chip Athletic Club podcast. I'm stoked to welcome Dr. Scott Sherr on the show of Transcriptions. Really quick, before we kind of get into that, I want to make sure I give some plugs for our partners. We really appreciate you guys for supporting us. First Form, Sweet Perfections Protein Cookies, Log 10, the only pilot logbook that I use. Built Different Community, which is helping all those business entrepreneurs make sure that they're able to get their business off the ground, make it for them. And then new partners, actually Dash Track, which will help you guys build a website kind of from scratch. We're really excited to start partnering up with those guys. I'm not going to get too much more into the rest of it. We got some more programs coming up soon. I think we're actually going to start doing a military fitness program where we'll just run every single fitness test that exists in every single military community and kind of see how it goes. And we'll build some programs for it. But that's coming up later in the summer. I want to get into the discussion with Scott because he's got a lot to talk about and a lot of wisdom to bestow upon us silly pilots and former athletes. So without further ado, brother, welcome. I'm excited to have you. Tell me a little bit about yourself, origin story. You can go as far back as you kind of want to, and we'll kind of go from there.
Sure. Well, thanks for having me, Blaise. This is fun. I guess the short-ish, longish, I'll see what I can do here. But I grew up the son of a chiropractor, so pretty out of the box. I'm an internal medicine doc now, but my whole upbringing was how you can do things as naturally as possible. And so I've kind of come full circle over the years, really trying to support people from a health optimization perspective as best I can, looking at foundational biomarker testing, optimizing health from a diet and lifestyle perspective, but also, I've been on the performance side for a long time. I've been involved in a field called hyperbaric medicine for many years. It got me into the performance side. I work with athletes, high performers, all the major league, equivalents, Major League Baseball, NHL, NFL, a lot of NHL actually over the years, interestingly enough, Major League Soccer, women. So I've done all that stuff over the years. I work with lots of operators, lots of military. I was involved with, actually early on in my career, involved in concussion and traumatic brain injury, and a lot of work in that capacity as well for people that, couldn't go back to the Army or to the military in general because of issues, and getting them back and everything in kind of in between. So that's just a little bit of what I do, but I'm also the father of 4 kids. I have 4 kids here in Colorado where I live. So I'm very much interested in health optimization and in kids and athletes as kids. I have 2 of my kids are student athletes as well. So all this I think applies in various ways. Although I've never been in the military, I've never flown a helicopter or a plane. I give you guys a lot of credit. I think you're mostly crazy, but that's why you do what you do, right? So.
No way, man. Remember, they put monkeys in space. Our job can't be that hard, So
I like that line, but I don't believe it. So.
Well, I appreciate it, man. So landing on functional medicine, what an interesting path. I feel like you're going down this, you said chiropractic kind of practice to start, and then you kind of pivot to this functional medicine thing. Like functional medicine, to my understanding, is relatively new. Tell me a little bit about like your discovery of how you kind of wanted to find yourself in that community, and then where that's kind of led you now. Cause I think it's pretty interesting to hit on, because a lot of people are like, oh dude, what is even functional medicine at this point in the year 2026?
Yeah. So my dad is a chiropractor. So I grew up the son of a chiropractor, and I went to conventional medical school when I was a kid, when I was obviously in my 20s, and I learned conventional medicine at that point. And doing that, it was an intentional way of me deciding, what, I learned the alternative stuff since I was a kid. I know all the crazy things. Let's learn the conventional stuff too, and kind of see where it all lands. And the high-minded idea of like bridging the big chasm between the two. And functional medicine is sort of part of that ecosystem now that's outside of conventional medicine. And it was kind of the first main specialty that was an alternative to conventional medicine. And the idea with functional medicine on its own is it's, instead of looking at just like Band-Aids for problems, if you have blood pressure, we'll give you blood pressure medications. If you need surgery, we'll do surgery. It's like, well, what is the root cause of the stuff that's going on? Like, not just why is you have blood pressure that's elevated, or you're fat or whatever. No offense, if you can't use that word, I don't know anymore, but
you got it, dude. You can use that word.
It's okay. Politically incorrect or whatever, but I tend to be that way. I try not to be, but sometimes I try to be. Anyway, so functional medicine is kind of like the root causes of stuff rather than just looking at sort of the band-aids that is conventional medicine. You probably know conventional medicine is great for acute things. It's great for surgeries and trauma. And I trained in a trauma center when I was in medical school in Baltimore. And I mean, all the military branches would go train there because of all the shock and trauma in Baltimore. Gunshot wounds, stabbings, knifing, whatever.
Bro, it's busy there.
It's busy. Yeah. I learned a lot. And like medicine, like it's amazing what doctors can do to save people's lives in those cases, but can they keep them healthy? Absolutely not. And conventional medicine is really, really bad at that. And functional medicine was the first field that came out to try to be an alternative to that. And I'm actually trained in something a little bit different. I'm trained in something called health optimization medicine, which is even newer than functional medicine. And it goes by HOME for short, HOME, health optimization medicine. And it's kind of like a newer framework that instead of looking at just the root causes of illness, like why your gut hurts or why your leg hurts or why your brain's not working as well, it takes it down like another step and says, well, how about we optimize your health rather than focusing on disease and optimizing foundational biomarkers, your vitamins, minerals, nutrients, cofactors, your diet, your lifestyle, setting the disease aside a little bit. And that's actually very in line with how I grew up as the son of a chiropractor. It wasn't like you were kind of like going for the root cause of an illness most of the time. It was mostly like, let's change how the body is aligned and optimize diet and lifestyle and see how things get better, quote unquote, on their own when you give the body what it needs to heal. And so that's my framework. It's called health optimization medicine. And it's the framework of everything I do. So if somebody comes to tell me, hey, doc, I have migraines, I go, okay, great. But, we're not just going to talk about giving you medication for migraine. We're not just going to talk about giving you, finding the root cause of your migraine, which is important. Maybe it's dairy, maybe it's chocolate, maybe it's flying too many airplanes or whatever it might be, right? It could be a lot of different things. That's important too. But what's underneath that is how well your cells are working on a regular basis. Because your cells, the cells of your body, they run every single tissue of your body. No matter what tissue you have, brain, heart, your penis, your reproductive organism, your leg, it doesn't matter. They all have cells at their base. And the cell itself works the same no matter if it's in your reproductive organs or if it's in your brain. And the cell is the base of everything. And so what we do is look at it more of like a cellular machinery itself, and particularly looking at a part of the cell called the mitochondria, which is a little bit sexier now. I think you probably heard of the mitochondria, right? Like the mitochondria are like,
come on, dude, the powerhouse to the cell. My 8th grade biology class crushed it with that, man. Come on. So
this is perfect, right? So this is a good segue. So my daughter, who's just finished her 9th grade, she crushed her bio test, right? Because she has her dad who's a medical doc.
I would hope so.
But what she learned in her bio was that you have this beautiful cell that I was just describing. It has a nucleus, it has cytoplasm, it has a cell membrane, and has this thing in there called a mitochondria. And you hear about it, you're like, oh, it's the powerhouse of the cell, right? And you see a little picture of it, and there's one mitochondria in there. Do you know how many mitochondria you have in your body, Blaise? This is going to be a difficult one. This is a hint. It's more than trillions.
Well, I was going to say, you're teeing it up as if it's much more than one, my friend. Yeah.
Yes. So you have quadrillions of mitochondria in your body, quadrillions, meaning that some cells in your body have very few mitochondria and others have thousands of mitochondria per cell. The most mitochondria per cell are the cells in our body that have the most energy needs. So the first thing that you're going to think of probably is going to be your brain, right? And that's number 2. The first place in the body that has the most mitochondria per cell is in your reproductive organs. So if you're a female, it's your eggs. And if you're a male, it's your sperm. Because making a baby, especially for women, is very energy intensive, as we know, right? But the brain is not far behind. So if you have mitochondrial dysfunction, you have reproductive issues. So you have infertility, and then from the brain comes, it's like mood issues, mental health issues, injuries that won't heal in the brain. You have brain fog, concentration problems. You also have a lot of mitochondria in your heart, your liver, your musculoskeletal tissue. So you have exercise intolerance. So it goes down the line here. So in my clinical practice, it's all about really looking at how well your cells are making energy. And from there, kind of building people up, because once energy production gets better or gets more optimized, or gets to another gear of performance in your world as well, then it's amazing what people don't realize they have the capacity to be able to do. Because most people don't realize over years they decline, without even knowing it. And then guys are the worst at this. They have no idea. And then all of a sudden they're like, yeah, how you doing? Like, oh, I'm good. I'm fine. Everything's good. And then you optimize the mitochondria and they're like, holy shit, I didn't know how badly I felt beforehand, because it's like a slow burn for a lot of us. So anyway, that's a little bit on the mitochondria, and that's the framework that I use. It's called health optimization medicine.
Yeah, the slow burn that you talk about is pretty funny, because we talk to a lot of clients that are like, yeah, out of nowhere, I'm in my mid 30s or 40s and I'm falling asleep on the couch snoring at 3 o'clock in the afternoon and I have no energy, and I'm 30, 40 pounds overweight, and then I just found myself stuck in this position, brain fog, fatigue, all those kinds of things that you're kind of hitting on. And I'm really interested to hear like this mitochondrial issue. And I think you and I've actually heard Mark Hyman talk about as well, the mitochondrial dysfunction that a lot of people kind of find themselves stuck in perpetuating. What are some things that are like leading into that and making that worse? So, we talk probably, diet, exercise, you can talk about sleep, stress, recovery, like kind of those quintessential things that are kind of really important to hit on. Like, talk to me about how we find ourselves in the year 2026 with the amount of information that we have that's readily available online out there. How do we find ourselves still having this perpetuated problem of mitochondrial dysfunction?
Yeah, there's a lot of reasons we have this as an issue, but the way to think about it is that it's kind of like the final common denominator for a lot of different things, right? When the mitochondria aren't working well, all the symptoms that you described very, very well, the ones that I was describing, and also conditions as well: fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue, long COVID, chronic brain fog, poor energy, autoimmune conditions. The list can go on. They all have an element of mitochondrial dysfunction going on as being a part of it. But that doesn't mean you just treat the mitochondria as far as giving it what it needs. You have to know what are the causes in this case, right? And so one of the number one reasons why people have mitochondrial dysfunction these days is what's called insulin resistance. So blood sugars that are elevated. So if you have metabolic syndrome, your blood sugars are too high. What happens is if you have too much sugar getting to your cells, what happens is your mitochondria try to keep up. If you have all this sugar, it tries to make energy with all that sugar. But over time, because sugar is what we use to make energy in our cells for the most part, we also can use fat byproducts like ketones, for example. But for the most part, it's glucose. And so if too much of it, what happens is that making energy in our cells is not free. Our cells are like, our mitochondria specifically are like gasoline powered vehicles. We make energy, ATP, which is our energy currency. We make about 150 pounds of ATP every single day to maintain our energy demands, or to meet our energy demands. But we don't just make ATP, we also make waste products of energy like exhaust. We make water, we make carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide goes to the plants, they make the oxygen, the beautiful cycle that all you remember from 8th grade bio too, of course, maybe, right? But they also make reactive oxygen species, or these free radicals. And when you're making energy, you're making these free radicals, and the more energy you make, the more free radicals you make. And what the body is trying to do with these free radicals is, some of them in a little bit is okay, but too much, it's like rusting in the system. And you need antioxidants to be able to neutralize those things, like vitamin C and glutathione and even melatonin that people think of as for sleep. Melatonin is one of our most powerful antioxidants in our mitochondria. And so if you have too much energy you're making because you have too much glucose getting to your mitochondria, the system is going to start breaking down. The mitochondria start dysfunctioning. And so that's like a number one reason. The number two, although I would actually venture to say number two is probably bigger than number one, is a very large category called stress or sympathetic activation. The idea is that many of us are living in a fight or flight mode all the time. This is when our sympathetic nervous system, which is our fight or flight nervous system, is active all the time.
Bear's chasing you, my friend.
What's that?
I said the bear's chasing you, my friend.
Exactly. Like in medicine, we call it getting chased by the saber-toothed tiger for whatever reason. But the problem is the saber-toothed tiger is you doom scrolling on your phone. It's the argument with your spouse or partner that's still making you shake or upset 2 or 3 days later. It's the relationships with your family that are not that good. and that are weighing on you all the time. It's the trauma you had as a child with something terrible, or the military operations that didn't go well, or somebody that you knew that died or that got injured in front of you. Like, that stuff is real, and that stuff makes your nervous system not feel safe anymore. And like, I know, like, sometimes these words like kind of can feel like woke to people, like safety and physiologic safety and biological safety. But what we really mean by that is that your nervous system doesn't feel like it can unclamp itself. It can unclench itself. And when your nervous system's up and elevated like that all the time, you're releasing a ton of a hormone called cortisol, which is your stress hormone. You need cortisol. If you didn't have cortisol, you would die. But if it's up all the time, it's going to vastly dysregulate your whole system, including your mitochondria, and you're not going to be making energy as well. You're also going to be pumping out neurotransmitters like epinephrine and norepinephrine, or adrenaline and noradrenaline. They're going to make your immune system function worse. Your hormones are going to go through the tank, and your mitochondria are going to suffer. So those are probably the biggest two: insulin resistance and sympathetic activation. And then you also have things like infections that will do it. Like, if you got COVID, you had mitochondrial stress for sure. If you have long COVID, you absolutely do. Mold, Lyme, co-infections, even medications that doctors will prescribe for things like metformin for diabetes causes dysfunction of part of the mitochondria. Statins do it as well. They cause dysfunction of part of the mitochondria. Proton pump inhibitors, even birth control pills for females. And so the list goes on and on, And so that's what we're dealing with is really a kind of all of these inputs that are coming in from the environment that are either directly causing our sympathetic nervous system to kind of go haywire, or directly affecting our cells, our mitochondria, to make it very difficult for them to make energy. And then you're left with the exact kind of picture that you described with somebody in their mid-30s or even younger now. I'm seeing it just with this whole sort of toxic soup of challenge related to all this kind of going on at the same time.
Yeah, it's interesting. I feel like the car analogy, I'm imagining like somebody trying to start up their lawnmower outside, and they flood the engine because they just have so much fuel, and they're not able to kind of get the waste out with the free radicals like discussion that you're kind of having. And then, thinking about that from a stress environment too, it's the same way, right? You have so much input, you're not able to kind of give yourself that opportunity to rest and digest, to really turn that nervous system off. And then you're not able to kind of check in and then, pull that mitochondria out of that state. So you're able to kind of function as kind of advertised. And, we talk about all the time, your stressors for somebody, whether they're, the kid with daddy's money who's not able to drive the Porsche, like, he's stressed out about that. And so is the person who's looking for their next meal. It's just like, they're in a different place in life to where they're feeling that stress, but the body's reacting in the same manner for both of those people, which obviously is going to be something that is super challenging. And you talked a little bit about insulin and glucose and sugar, and geez Louise, we're talking about the year 2026 and how much access we have to the typical American diet of, things that come in a box, cookies, cakes, donuts. I'll tell you what, I love a donut though. I'm not going to lie, but think about
I love cookies.
I know, but think about all these things.
Yeah.
We have so much access, and we don't have to go out and hunt and forage and do the things that we used to have to do that ended up giving our digestive system a break. I can go on my phone, go on Amazon, and I could have a snack or DoorDash or whatever at my house within the next like 10 minutes before we get off of this episode, which is just amazing in some ways, but also I feel like ends up stressing the body in other ways too. And the last thing I feel like that I really want to hit on too, that you're like, hey, there's some people that are getting treatment in a conventional sense in medicine with statins, with all these other things. And it's like, oh, wow, some of these things are actually also contributing to this as well. Although it's some of that acute care that we discussed before, just because this is acute care for this thing doesn't necessarily mean that you're not going to pay for that down the line as well, if you're not making the requirement or required dietary shifts, lifestyle changes, and those other things that you kind of work with your clients with. Am I on the right track there?
Yeah, I think it's important to realize that it's not a zero-sum game, in the sense that sometimes you need to get medical interventions for various things, but understanding what's happening while you're doing those kinds of things is absolutely essential, right? If you have to be on a statin for whatever reason, I'm not 100% against statins. I'm not 100% for them. I think it's a very individual decision as to what you do and how you do these things, and working with a provider to not treat you like a population of people, but treat you as you. Your own biology is absolutely essential. And that's a challenge with conventional medicine, to be honest, Blaise, is just that they look at population data and what's called epidemiology. And looking at statin trials, for example, if you have to treat a certain number of people to get one person a benefit, right? That's called the number needed to treat. And oftentimes that's between 50 and 100 people for one person to actually benefit from that intervention, right? And that's a good number needed to treat. That means the other people aren't benefiting from it; they're taking it, right? And so I think that's a little bit of an aside, just to get a sense that it's really important to know what's going on with your own biology and working with it individually as much as possible. But sometimes, you need to be on certain medications or whatever for whatever reasons, and that's okay. Knowing that there's mitigation strategies if you need to be on a statin, to be on something like, methylene blue, for example, which I know you know a little bit about, right? And so or something that additionally it's going to support mitochondrial function, so that at the same time you're on your statin, you're taking your CoQ10, which gets depleted with statins, and you're taking some methylene blue, and you're doing other ways to support mitochondrial function. Because in the end, it's not going to be a direct path for anybody. So sometimes we have to kind of navigate this. And when it comes to the stress response, that's a big elephant in the room for almost everybody. And I like what you mentioned about the rest digest. That's called your parasympathetic nervous system, right? That's the other part of your nervous system, right? So there's the stress running from the bear, the saber-toothed tiger, or whatever, or you're doom scrolling or whatever it is now. But then you have to have time when you're resting, digesting, and detoxifying, right? So classic example, you go on vacation, you get sick, right? Why? Because all of a sudden you're no longer running at 1,000,000 miles an hour. You're finally getting enough sleep, and your body's like, oh, perfect. This is the perfect time to actually get rid of things that have been building up, right? And you're like, damn it, I'm sick on vacation again. Well, it's because your body's trying to finally catch up with your sort of always being on, right? So for me, I call it the parasympathetic edge, actually, which is creating a way to be able to balance your nervous system more, where you're sympathetically activated when you need to, but you calm down your nervous system as soon as you don't need to be. And actually, the best people at this are operators, actually, people that fly planes and that have to be inside, operations where things are at high tense and high intense efforts, because you train for this stuff, right? So that when you're in that kind of situation, your nervous system doesn't go haywire, right? It goes up enough so you can actually maintain a capacity, but it doesn't go too high, because if it does go too high, you can't function that well, right? But most people are kind of already on that edge where they're not on that parasympathetic side, they're on the sympathetic side. So that any more stress on top of that is going to make things fall off a cliff, right? And you see that all the time where somebody's hyper stressed and then one other thing happens and the whole cliff, you just feel like you're falling off it.
House of cards comes down, my friend.
Yeah. And this is really important for exercise too. People don't realize this. If you go into exercise already sympathetically activated, the amount of reserve that you have when you're actually trying to exercise and to gain muscle and performance is not very much, because you're already at a super high level. You don't have much more you can go, right? But if you start off your exercise more parasympathetic, more relaxed with your nervous system, the amount of tension you can put on your muscles, for example, is significantly more. So your delta, the change is much higher, right? And so if you come into a workout more relaxed, your capacity to work out at maximal capacity is going to be much, much higher. And this goes to the other side of a workout too. When you finish exercising, do you go plow through the next things? Do you go to the next thing and the next thing and the next thing? If you do that, you never give yourself the time to go down back into parasympathetic, and you're not going to make the gains that you think you're going to make. You're not going to get the recovery you think you're going to get. You're like, why aren't I gaining muscle? Well, you're going from exercise to 10 hours of work talking to people without a break. Why do you think you can't gain any muscle, right? And so it's a big, big change for people. Even in my world, like I remember talking to a friend of mine, Blaise, who's one of the smartest people I know. She's like, you mean after you work out, you're supposed to relax? I'm like, yeah. She's like, oh, I should do that. And then she started doing it, and she's like, she's gained like 5 pounds of muscle in a month. Like she's like, it's like, it's ridiculous because as soon as you calm down that nervous system on both ends, your whole system starts calming down and starts being able to recover, detox, and that mitochondria become under less stress so they can recover too.
Yeah, it's interesting you talk about that because we work with a lot of high performers here, and I'm sure you do as well, kind of in the circles that you're in. And it's like the year 2026 is all about efficiency. How can I get the most bang for my buck all hours of the day? I'm go, 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 go. And I'm honestly a victim of this as well, where I kind of end up doing it myself too. But I have found, some way that I do that is I like to use music as kind of a guide for myself. So, I'm trained with the Exos training model, and we typically use that as well, which a lot of Olympians, professional athletes utilize their training model as well. It's not drastically different from what other models essentially have. You got a little mobility warm up, and then you're doing some, dynamic movement. You'll get some power work in, strength training. You'll do some, at the end of the workout, typically some aerobic capacity type things. But at the end of the day, they utilize music as a cue throughout the workout to see how that thing goes. So right at the beginning, you'll be kind of in like a lower, I'll call like mid-range music. And then as you start working up into your power work and your strength building, they'll kind of amp it up a little bit. So then you're getting into like,
Yep.
well, yeah, some old like AC/DC when you're peaking or whatever your thing becomes.
Sure.
And then as you finish, you started to get start coming down. And then you do actually start doing some sort of, recovery, whether that's foam rolling or mobility or some like static or even slightly dynamic stretches that are going to kind of help loosen you up. And the key is you're playing with your central nervous system so that you're able to like cue that into where you're at. And then, oh, by the way, when you finish, if you take that 5 to 10 minutes at the end to do it, like you said, you're drastically going to improve your ability to, one, function after that, and two, see the results that you're looking for. And again, if it's good enough for Olympians and professional athletes, it should be good enough for Joe who sits there on his couch and is looking for the best bang for his buck after his workout, right? I mean,
yeah, 100%. I mean, I love the music analogy, or the music playlist is basically what you're saying. And it's, I think it's a good example, right? Because you wouldn't want to start your workout from, at workout zero, massively going to 11 on AC/DC and doing your powerlifting immediately, right? And that's right. What you're basically doing if you're sympathetically dominant when you start your workout. If you're already in fight or flight, it's like AC/DC is already on to 10, right? And you might want to get to 11 during your workout, but how are you going to do that if your sympathetic nervous system is already up there so far?
Right, man. You blew your load too early with Thunderstruck on right away.
You can't do it. That. You got to wait on Thunderstruck. It's funny. You're a good story that I like to tell is he's a friend of mine. His name's Jeremy Bloom, and Jeremy, he's the only Olympic skier and NFL wide receiver. He was NFL and Olympic skier, and I was doing a podcast with him a long time ago. I was interviewing him. He's a really cool guy. He's actually the CEO of the X Games right now, and
doesn't suck, man. That job doesn't suck.
No, he's awesome. Yeah. And when he first started skiing, when he was young, like in his teens, he was listening to Metallica and like Rage Against the Machine. And like, but by the time he got to be Olympic level, he was listening to Mozart and Beethoven before he would go down on a run, right? Because it's not about amping yourself up anymore. It's actually about bringing yourself down just a little bit and getting in that sort of that line, that sort of line between sympathetic and parasympathetic, where you're just above parasympathetic and you're in sympathetic, but you're not so far up that you can't actually function anymore, right? Because when you're so sympathetically dominant, what happens is that your brain function goes down. It's the part of your front of your brain called your executive function, which is in the front of your brain, your frontal lobe. That's where you keep things in your mind. That's where you bring things in from long-term memory into short-term. It's visual spatial recognition. So seeing the world around you. Like the classic is like you have the dream where you're about to give a speech and your mind goes blank or something like that. That's because the frontal lobe gets low blood flow under stressful conditions. So the key is to not be that stressed and, again, not blow your load too fast, as you well described. So
yeah. No, it's funny that you say that. I think it's interesting to almost utilize that music analogy. And I know we're kind of hitting on this a lot, but like getting you into that flow state, right? Where it's just hard enough to where you're able to operate just challenging enough, but also it, keeps you kind of so focused and kind of invested. So yeah, super interesting. So tell me, like, let's say Blaise comes into your office and I'm like, hey man, I'm that guy. I'm the 35-year-old guy sitting on the couch. I'm falling asleep at 3 o'clock. I'm 40 pounds overweight. What are the things that you're going to be like, hey dude, like this is how we kind of get you there? Because I'm sure you're doing a little bit of coaching, a little bit of like guidance. And at the end of the day, you're trying to figure out like, hey, what's this root cause of what's going on? But what are some like very common things that you're like, oh yeah, you need to start with, X, Y, or Z if you're not already doing that. And then we can kind of move on to what I'll call as varsity after that point when we start with the basics.
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I think what it comes down to is really depends on the person and how motivated they are, because motivation can be really challenging if you don't feel good. And that's because you don't have enough energy to be motivated. It's kind of one of those weird things where even anxiety, for example, people have a lot of anxiety. Oftentimes you need to have enough energy to not have anxiety. And what I mean by energy, I don't mean like woo woo energy. I'm talking about mitochondrial energy, energy in your cells to produce energy so that you can have enough motivation, that so you can have enough capacity to actually do the things that you want to do. Because, you talk to that 40 pound person, they want to feel better. They want to stop eating crap. They want to stop, they want to start exercising. They want to work on their relationships. They want to work on their diet. That sounds like the easy shit, but it's the hard stuff. Like that's like, I can tell people till the cows come home about, yeah, you change your diet, change your lifestyle, start drinking more water, hydrate. I mean, that's a little bit easier for some people. That's a little bit lower hanging fruit. But when it comes to like, yeah, why don't you get out of a bad relationship? Why don't your partner snoring at night, get a sleep divorce, sleep in a different room. Like those aren't easy things for people to do without enough energy. So
right.
What I've gravitated over the years to, Blaise, is sort of like a tiered kind of strategy, if you want to call it, like in the sense that I want to give people some help now. I want to get them to feel better as fast as I can so that when they start feeling better, then all the diet, lifestyle, supplementation that I'm going to recommend for them becomes easier, because long term, I love putting them on a health optimization medicine program with me where I check all their foundational biomarkers. I check their mitochondria. I check their cells. I check their gut. I check their hormones. And then I optimize all that stuff, right? But doing that, it's not like it's an immediate 5 days later you feel better. It's like 3 months or 6 months later you start feeling better, right? And so if I tell a patient, I tell that person, I tell you, Blaise, the 40 pound overweight version of you, don't worry, just wait 3 to 6 months and you're going to feel better. Like it just doesn't go over very well, right?
Right.
And so what I've developed over the years is kind of a strategy where I start giving people support right now, so that they start getting more motivation to do the things that are a little bit harder or that take more work and take more, energy, right? Like I can tell people to do breath work, but that doesn't often work either. If they're like, yeah, sure, I'm going to do breath work, and they don't do breath work, right? Or you should start doing some yoga, or start getting more sunlight, or there's certain like low hanging fruits that I'll start right away. I mean, certainly try to get people hydrated is a big one, because just drinking more water, hydration throughout the day can go a long way. Trying to work on your sleep is a big one, right? And so typically, guys and gals will be okay with me to say, okay, my sleep sucks. Let's work on that, right? So I can work on various strategies to start helping with sleep, try to sleep timing and sleep routines and sleep strategies and et cetera, et cetera. So, but I often honestly will start off with some very targeted supplementation to work on mitochondrial function very quickly, and also working on sleep very quickly are like kind of my two biggest levers, because once somebody starts sleeping better, everything gets easier. Once people start having more energy during the day, everything gets easier. And then it then becomes a lot easier to say, okay, I'm going to change my diet. I'm going to change my lifestyle and do those kinds of things. So I focus a lot on this really cool compound called methylene blue, which has been around for a while, but it's got a really great potential to help people very quickly from the mitochondrial perspective. And I focus a lot on the nervous system portion called the GABA system. GABA is a neurotransmitter in our brain. It's like the brakes of our brain. And if you can work on the brakes of the brain, calm the nervous system down with sleep, like those are the two biggest levers I've found to really start helping people right now. I mean, there's other things too, but those are the ones that I've found to be most recently to be the most game changing.
Cool. So you're almost kind of attacking two prongs. You're kind of taking like what I'll call probably the approach that we have, where we're like, hey, dude, we can't get you to lose 40 pounds in 3 months or 6 months or whatever. We can get you to start to look and move and feel better. But, it's ironic. Like people have, and I'll go on a quick aside here, where like you'll have somebody who gains 1, 2, 3 pounds every year for 10 years and they're 30 pounds overweight, and they're thinking like it's going to go off in, 4 weeks and you're going to be shredded or whatever. And it's like, this obviously is not the case. Right. So you're kind of attacking two things. You're like, hey, I'm going to stop the bleeding now. And I'm also going to make you, better moving forward with these other coaching mechanisms and these other levers. So
Yep.
tell me a little bit more like, hey, you talked a little bit, hinted about methylene blue. I heard a little bit about it on the show with Mark, so I kind of have a little bit of an understanding. But tell me, like, hey, dude, I've never heard of that before. I'm Blaise. I'm a commercial pilot in the world, and I'm like, hey, this is kind of piquing my interest. Maybe I'm this person who struggles with sleep, and I'm on the road, and I'm going through different time zones. I'm at pressure altitude all the time, and I'm, I walk up to the other co-pilot in the plane, and I'm basically falling asleep and I can't remember their name because I have so much brain fog. Like what could this thing do for me in my specific situation?
Well, I also want to say that one of the biggest things that I do also ask people to do initially is a little bit of movement, even if it's a small amount. So I think that, it's very much aligned with trying to get people going. I forgot about that piece too, as a low hanging fruit, even if it's like walking around the freaking block, right? Something like that.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Well, if you need any help with that, you let me know. We got free trials for anybody that works with you. We'll send them by.
I love it. Yeah. And that's what I was going to mention. I think there's a lot of synergy there. But when it comes to methylene blue, so look, it's one of these compounds that, funny enough, went viral about in January 2025, for those that are listening, because RFK, the Human Health Secretary, just confirmed at the time, was using methylene blue in his water, right? And his water was blue and everybody was going crazy about this stuff. But it's been around for a long, long time. It's been around over 125 years, actually, this particular compound. It was first made in the 1870s as a textile to dye things blue, actually, crazy enough. But somehow they realized this particular compound was also at higher doses a fantastic anti-infective. And so in the late 1800s, in 1897, it became the first drug registered with our FDA for malaria, to treat malaria. It was the first drug available really as an antimicrobial. So back through World War II, it was one of the premier antimicrobials that if you were going to the Pacific Theater in World War II, you were taking it prophylactically to prevent fungal infections. And they had songs, MacArthur even had songs about going blue in the loo, because if you take methylene blue, you urinate blue. And so, loo being, loo bathroom.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. So there were songs about them, like the World War II guys would all be singing about it, evidently. That's what I've heard. And so during that time, it was an antimicrobial, and it came less out of favor after penicillin and things like that came around. But over the last couple of decades, we've realized that it has, at lower doses especially, a fantastic capacity to support mitochondrial function specifically. And when I'm talking about mitochondrial function, I've described a little bit already about our cells being like gasoline-powered cars. And what methylene blue really does is come in like an electric-powered vehicle. It comes in and helps you with energy. So it can make energy for you if the cells aren't making energy very easily or very well. And at the same time, it can work directly as an antioxidant. And so it can mop up the exhaust of making energy. So it comes in and comes in with free energy, basically. And so you started off at low doses, and all of a sudden, within about 3 to 5 days of finding the right dose, you're going to see that your energy is going to go up. And it's much better than just taking something like an antioxidant if you can't make energy. So like, as example is this, you have a lot of garbage collection, but you also can't make a lot of energy, right? So you don't have people actually collecting the garbage. If you take away the garbage, but there's nobody collecting the garbage anyway, the garbage is still going to pile back up, right? If you have energy production at the same time, though, then you have an efficient system, just like because you have people that are operating the machines, right? And so that's what methylene blue is able to do. It comes in on the energy and the detox side at the same time. And so as a result of that, within about 3 to 5 days, you should feel energy going up. You should feel your brain fog getting better you should feel your fatigue getting better, your inflammation, even your pain. And that's the beautiful thing about it. It doesn't take 3 months or a year on methylene blue to find that it's working for you. When you find the right dose, it's within 3 to 5 days. And it can work just like oxygen in the cells too. So if there's less oxygen around, i.e. you're hypoxic because you're pressurized on an airplane to 6 or 8 or 10,000 feet, whatever you guys are. Typically on a commercial airplane, it's 8,000 feet. You're hypoxic on those planes, right? And so you're getting less oxygen, and your cells, your brain is not happy over time because you're not making energy effectively. Classic example for somebody on a commercial airline is that you're on a commercial airline, they close the cabin door, and all of a sudden you feel tired. Well, why? It's because all of a sudden you just got hypoxic. Your amount of oxygen went down in the air about 3 or 4%. And that's enough to have significant effect on the mitochondria itself. And so you got to make sure you get good, clean sources of methylene blue because it can be contaminated with heavy metals. Most of the Amazon stuff out there purchased directly is not what it says on the label. So you have to be super careful. But if you get a good, clean source of it, you have a fantastic capacity to work on mitochondrial function like within a very short period of time.
Cool. Let me see if I can kind of break an analogy down for what methylene blue is kind of doing. So let's say we've got like a bucket of water, and we're trying to fill we're just trying to like move that water through the bucket and make sure that we're able to get new water in there and dispose of the old water because we don't want it to, build up mold or whatever else is going to get in there and get too much algae growing on the side. So what methylene blue is essentially doing, from what it sounds like, is you're increasing the capacity of the hose that's going to fill the bucket. And you're also drilling a bigger hole in the bucket so that you can not only provide more water, but you're also providing the ability to pull more out. And then in that process, you're getting more efficient in the way that your water's kind of flowing through, and then i.e. producing energy throughout the same time. Am I kind of understanding?
Beautifully said. That's well said. Yeah. So, and you're not going to have as many buildup of any waste products like in the bucket, right? So no mold and no rust and things like that or less of it because you have a bigger output coming from the bucket as well. Yeah. Good
right.
Analogy.
Yeah. So the thought is like, hey, this is happening. And you said 3 to 5 days is something that you're able to see kind of some sort of a change. Now, how is that happening? Like what is actually going on? I know you kind of broke it down in there, but like tell me like what of this methylene blue is attacking the mitochondria in X amount of way. And you don't have to get super scientific, but I'm sure people are going to kind of be like, oh yeah, man, like this sounds almost like miracle drug-esque. And a lot of people tend to be skeptical of things that you're like, oh yeah, like this is exactly how this thing is, without kind of a little bit more understanding. So beat the skeptic out of somebody with me.
Yeah, let me first say that I don't think people should be taking methylene blue for the rest of their life every day. I think that the main thing here is that it's a fantastic bridge when you're not feeling good and having, a long way to go or even a little way to go, but it's going to supercharge the mitochondria now so you start feeling better. And then over time, the goal is to use it more targetedly. So if you're going to be hypoxic on an airplane, or if you're going to go, to mountains and go altitude training, like I was in Tibet in China in September, and I was using methylene blue at 18,700 feet. That's 17,800 feet, which was Everest Base Camp. And you can use it as a significant hypoxic stress mitigator, right? But I'm not using it every day, okay? But if you're sicker, if you have more mitochondrial stress, it can be a great way to support you now and even daily for a while until you start building up the system. And that's what I was alluding to earlier, where over the long term, it's optimizing your vitamins, your minerals, your nutrients, your lifestyle, your diet. You stop drinking alcohol, you stop eating the pizza, you get out of a bad relationship, these kinds of things, right? But in the beginning, it's a fantastic way to supercharge it. And I will do my best to maintain the physiologic explanation here as simply as I can. Okay. But in the mitochondria, what is the mitochondria actually doing? It's making energy, right? Okay. But what is it making energy from? Your food. Okay. So we eat our carbohydrates and our fats, mostly carbohydrates for most people, to specifically take electrons from our food. Okay. Food has a chemical composition. It has electrons. Those electrons go down into the mitochondria and they float through a process called the electron transport chain. The electron transport chain are proteins on the mitochondria that allow these electrons to go through, When they go through with each of these proteins, there's 4 of them, complex 1, 2, 3, and 4, pretty simple. As they go through, you create an artificial gradient in the mitochondria, a powerful energy gradient, so that when something comes down with that gradient, it creates a lot of energy along the way, because there's a lot of built up potential energy is the best way to think about it. And so that's how we make ATP. And so all of those proteins are working together. And when you make that ATP, like we talked about, you're also making these waste products. You're making water, carbon dioxide, you're making reactive oxygen species. Why is it oxygen in there? So oxygen is what's called the final electron acceptor in the mitochondria on that electron transport chain. So the electrons that are floating through, they have to go someplace. At the end of the chain, at complex 4, they get picked up by oxygen and make water. That's why you need oxygen to breathe. That's why when you don't have a lot of oxygen, the system starts breaking down. Okay, so there's your mitochondria lesson, everybody. That's more than you learned in 8th grade. Okay, but what happens with methylene blue is that methylene blue can come in and compensate for any dysfunction on that electron transport chain, whether it's the electrons flow through any of those complexes or through the process of the reactive oxygen species that are created about making energy. Statins, for example, they disrupt complex 1 and complex 2. Metformin disrupts complex 1. Pesticides, herbicides, chronic infections, they can affect complex 1, 2, or 3. Okay. You guys have all heard of like NAD, for example, right? NAD is like the cool new, longevity compound, right? NAD is an electron carrier. It brings electrons to complex 1. And if complex 1 isn't working, it doesn't matter how much NAD you give somebody, complex 1 isn't going to work. And so what methylene blue can do, it has all these sort of ninja move capacities. It can bypass all these complexes that aren't working very well, bring electrons further down the chain so that you can maintain energy production is what it comes down to. And so that's really what's happening. And then it also works as a detoxifier as well. So the fancy name, it's called a redox cycler. It helps with either donating electrons to the electron transport chain or picking up free electrons. And that's really the main ways that methylene blue works. And so the data here is very well described. The research is very clear. You've heard of cyanide poisoning before, right? I'm sure. Yep. So cyanide poisoning, cyanide is a destruction of the 4th complex of the electron transport chain in the mitochondria. So the antidote for cyanide poisoning is methylene blue, because methylene blue can do all these crazy maneuvers around the mitochondrial membrane to allow electrons still to flow, even if the final complex isn't working, even if the final complex can't even bind oxygen. Does it do it forever? No. I mean, but it can be a temporizing maneuver for somebody that has, cyanide poisoning. So that just gives you kind of maybe the sort of the heft of it, of what it can potentially do. And so we're using this at low doses, anywhere between like 4 or 8 milligrams of methylene blue to maybe 25 milligrams as a fantastic dose to support mitochondrial function. And the key is to go slow with it, start off at a low dose and see how you feel, and then increase the dose every 3 to 5 days until you start feeling better. And it shouldn't be too subtle. Like it should be like, well, I do notice a difference. My energy is better. My brain fog is better. My inflammation is better. That afternoon slump is a big one for me. When I first started taking it, I noticed that when I took it, I didn't get that afternoon dip in the middle of the day. I look back at the day and like, oh, I didn't get tired. Or my son would come in when he'd come home from school and accidentally interrupt me during a podcast and say, "Hey, Dad," and I wouldn't get angry about it, right? I would just be like, "Oh, hey, I'll see you later," And you notice that your sort of mood and your capacity just goes up, and that's because you have more mitochondrial energy.
Yeah, it's interesting though. Like I'm thinking about this, like, oh yeah, man, this sounds super great. Why would I not want to be on that all the time? Why would I not want to be optimized in all that way? Because you say, hey, this is kind of like a short term, I'll say like micro performance. You're going to Everest, you're doing this specific training thing. Maybe you're going to go on a plane for, a long trip overseas or something like that. And this is something that can kind of help you prevent maybe a little jet lag or some, performance issues when you land. Like, tell me, like, what's the reason that like Blaise is not going to be taking this or on a methylene blue prescription for the rest of my life? Because, it sounds like the benefits are there. to be something that we could be like, oh yeah, we want to be on this a lot?
Well, the good news is that very low doses of it are extremely safe. I mean, you could take a low dose for 16 milligrams on a regular basis, and there really isn't any downside to this. I mean, there's a couple contraindications, which I'll talk about, which are some of the things you want to be careful of and maybe not want to take methylene blue if you have particular conditions, which I can talk about in a minute. But when it comes down to why you wouldn't want to take it every day, is that when you get more optimized, in general, you don't need it as much because your capacity is going to be higher. But saying that, most of us are under mitochondrial stress on a regular basis. Now, is that mitochondrial stress something that we're pretty resilient about? We bounce back pretty quick. If you're pretty well optimized, you should be able to do that, right? But if you're not as well optimized, which I should mention, 94% of US adults are mitochondrially dysfunctional. Metabolic health is directly related to mitochondrial health, and only 6% of the US population is metabolically healthy, which means only 6% of the US population has optimized mitochondrial function. So in that case, yes, do I think that most of us can benefit from methylene blue some of the time? The answer is absolutely yes, because most of us are not as optimized as we can be. The more optimized that you are, the less that you feel like you'll need it is what it comes down to. And for those guys and gals, usually I'm using it sort of on the edges of their performance. So endurance, for example, we know that methylene blue works by increasing aerobic capacity. And so my marathon runners, my cyclists, my ultra marathoners, they love it. And I had an ultra marathoner here in Colorado that did the Leadville 100-mile race and cut 3 hours off of his time using 32 milligrams of methylene blue every 4 hours. And it was because he had more aerobic capacity. So you can go further maintaining a heart rate up at a higher rate for longer, right? I even have some of my little old ladies that are 70 years old that go on treadmills and take their methylene blue because they can maintain their heart rate for longer while they're on their treadmill, right? And so it doesn't have to be your highest echelon of athlete, but certainly there's capacity to use that. And there are some people out there that will say that you shouldn't take methylene blue if you're metabolically healthy because it might make your mitochondria function worse. This comes from one study that was done on animals with stroke that showed that these animals that had strokes, they recovered vastly better with methylene blue. Okay. But in the area that was normal tissue, they had mild metabolic dysfunction in the area that was normal compared to the area before it. So the normal area of the brain that wasn't affected by the stroke was mildly dysfunctional compared to what it was before. The thing about this particular study is it was IV methylene blue at a very high dose, much higher than I would use in clinical practice. And clinically, we just don't see this. I don't see people with optimized mitochondria doing any worse with methylene blue on board. And I think that's been a challenge for me to sort of re-message in this world, because there's a couple of researchers that have come out that don't have clinical practices, that don't see patients, that have been talking about this. But clinically, it's not an issue. Like, low doses are very, very supportive. But if you get to higher doses, like above 50, 75, 100 milligrams, that's a lot of methylene blue. And that could potentially be detrimental to mitochondrial function, especially if it's already well optimized.
Okay. So I'm hearing this is kind of the kickstart, gets your performance right, or when you need it, because ultra marathoner pulling 3 hours off the time is pretty remarkable, right?
Yep.
Are these things, and you said you were working with some professional athletes, some high level people, this and that, even some military people have alluded to potentially using it in their day. Tell me, is this something that is on some sort of a banned substance list for professional athletes, Olympians? So I'm hearing this and I'm like, man, there's people that are in this top, or I'll call 1% of people all over the place, high performers, that they're looking for any amount of edge that they could have in their sport, in their life. A cyclist, if you tell an ultra marathoner that they're going to shave off 3 hours of their time by doing this, every 4 hours when you're racing, somebody's going to be like, oh yeah, dude, I'm doing that. And then, it's going to show up. More and more people are going to end up doing it. So tell me about some of that. And then I know you kind of hinted about a little bit of the risks and kind of
Yeah,
dispelling some of the myths that are kind of around the research based on the dose, which, anything, the poison or the dose kind of makes the poison at the end of the day, right? Like
yep,
you're going to
natural
end
or
up
not. Yep,
having that at even drinking too much water, you could end up, killing yourself at some point. So, um,
absolutely. Yeah, yeah,
tell me a little
yeah,
bit
yeah.
about like this like edge of performance and then this top 1% in these kind of very specific fields, whether you're, Navy SEAL or Olympic athlete or whatever, trying to kind of get an edge.
Methylene blue is completely legal in all those counts. It's water approved. It's illegal. You guys can use it in the military, no problem. It's not an issue. And that's the beautiful thing about it. And amazing thing about it is that it's been around such a long time. I have the cyclist that I work with, he's blasting through times. He doesn't tell anybody he's using it. He swallows it, swallows the methylene blue. It comes out in his urine, but just doesn't show anybody, right? But the only issue with that is that if you're getting piss tested, your urine's going to be blue. And if that happens, it's going to potentially scare the person that's testing your urine. But that's not the big deal. The second deal is that it's going to mess up the other analytes. And so it might not be able to really test the urine when it's blue. So you have to test it again when it's not blue. So that's one thing to be aware of. But there's nothing illegal
How
about
blue are we
taking it.
talking, man? Honestly, like, tell me, like,
It
is it
depends on your
like blue
dose.
Powerade? Like, where are we at?
It depends on your dose. Yeah. I mean, and for me, it could be a mild blue, like a blue tinge. If you've had your B vitamins in the morning, it could be like a neon green sometimes.
Oh, dude, Shrek's piss. Yeah, crazy.
Yeah. And also if you have a higher dose, it is full on Powerade blue, right? For sure. And that's usually a dose you don't typically need to be taking for a long period of time. Like I use high doses of methylene blue for infection, for severe stress. It's like cardiac issues, strokes, and things like that. Concussions. I've done it myself. When I've had various injuries over the years, I use high doses of methylene blue, and it still surprises me sometimes how blue the urine becomes when you go that high. But in general, it's usually sort of like a blue tinge to like a light Powerade kind of deal, right?
Okay.
And so on the edges of performance, again, I have Major League Baseball, Major League Soccer, NHL guys. I have NFL guys, all of them almost using methylene, and cyclists as well. The challenge here is that the research hasn't caught up yet, right? And so the research on performance isn't at the place where a lot of these teams as a team were like, yeah, we're getting behind this, right? So it's usually like the one guy or two that are willing to, go on the edge and do this, right? And that's what I've seen, and it's becoming more and more popular as well because there's also a focus part to it, right? And there's the capacity to maintain cognitive function for longer, and I think that's a big part of a lot of sports and a lot of athletic events. It's, you've heard this many times, right? It's like what, 10% physical and 90% mental. And I'm sure that's a lot in the operator world too, right? It's not like the physical stuff you can learn, almost anybody can, but it's the mental capacity to be able to do these things for day in, day out, long term or whatever, that becomes the real challenge. And then if people don't realize that, even if you're standing still, sitting still, like I don't know if you've seen these kind of statistics, but like the master chess players of the world that sit and play chess, they burn 7,000 calories without moving, all in the brain, right? So your brain is highly metabolic. And so if you can maintain and meet your energy demands for longer, well, what are you going to see? You're going to see that your brain is functioning at a higher capacity for longer too. So I'm definitely using it a lot on those edges, but even my weekend warriors and my athletes that are playing sports and, during the week and things like that, absolutely using it, for those kinds of people too, for sure.
Yeah, it's funny. We have a saying in aviation where the second you are flying the plane, you get 50% dumber. You said, and it's just kind of natural. Like every single person has it. So, if you're starting off from a higher echelon or higher threshold, you're going to be much better off, obviously, than the person who's kind of way down in the dumps.
Yeah. Do you think that's related to sympathetic activation? Do you think that's related to stress response, or what do you think that's from?
I don't know. We have to do like plane math, every once in a while you'll be doing fuel math and you'll be like, oh yeah, carry the two. You're sitting there trying to like do things. And if you're flying the plane and your body is having to do all of these different things, operate in 3 dimensions, manage your speed, look out for other traffic, all these other things, it just takes so much of your attention away from your capability to do those things. So utilizing automation, autopilot, the other pilot to take the controls is typically something that we find ourselves doing.
Right. So
So
it's
that
like the
you're able to
multitasking
kind of,
capacity. Yeah.
you're opening up your aperture to do those things. So
Yeah.
it's interesting having that as a potential to be something that, could help that moving forward too. So Scott, I know that you're CEO of a company that sources methylene blue. I had like two more quick questions for you, then I'm going to let you go. One, how much is it for like a normal person in a month? Because I know people are, typically are interested in the cost. And then two, tell me a little bit about like how you guys know your stuff is sourced well, tested, third party, whatever you guys kind of do to make sure that it's safe for the consumer.
Yeah. So on the safety things that we didn't get to that point, let me just make sure I round that out because, some people shouldn't take methylene blue, right? Or be very careful on how they're taking it. So if you have high blood pressure, methylene blue can sometimes increase your blood pressure. Sometimes it'll actually decrease it, but sometimes it'll go up. So if you're on any hypertensive medications, you got to work with a provider to make sure it's safe for you to take the methylene blue. Even at low doses, it can increase your blood pressure. So be aware of that. Also be aware if you're taking medications that increase serotonin, like SSRIs, SNRIs, and those kind of meds, because methylene blue increases serotonin as well. It's not usually unsafe to combine them, but it's always a good idea. Like if you're on really any medications, but especially those medications and the blood pressure medications, to work with a provider, just to kind of go slowly with your dosing and to make sure you're all right. The risk is small. Also, if you have kidney dysfunction, because methylene blue gets excreted in the kidneys, as we've been talking about with the Powerade, urine. And so it's important that you have normal kidney function, or if you don't, you have to really work with a provider closely just to make sure that your kidney function is monitored. It shouldn't make your kidney function worse, but it can build up in the system if you're not careful, because if your kidneys aren't excreting as much, as fast, that kind of thing. Methylene blue can also cause like detox kinds of symptoms when you first start, especially if you start at too high of a dose. So be aware of that. That's why it's also detox symptoms like headache and GI distress and brain fog, the things you're trying to, work on. And so it's just important, that you go slowly with the dosing. 4 milligrams is my usually starting dose. And I think that the other big thing on safety, this will kind of roll into your questions here, Blaise, at the end, is contamination, right? Because what is really important is that methylene blue can often be contaminated with heavy metals, things like lead, mercury, cadmium, and arsenic. And you don't want that, it's not something that's going to be helpful for the body. And so you got to be really careful about your sourcing of it. And so I'm not the CEO, I'm the chief medical officer of our company called Troscriptions. And we're the first company to actually come out with a product that had methylene blue in it back in 2020, 1 month before the pandemic, before anybody really knew about methylene blue. But we saw some of the studies on mitochondrial function, on cognitive performance. And so we were the first company to kind of come out with it at that time. It took us a year longer to launch the company than we anticipated, because it took us that long to find a good source of methylene blue that we felt comfortable using. Because I'm a clinician, I really did care about quality more than the average supplement company. And my colleague, Dr. Ted, who's on the team also. And so we went to the ends of the earth. And, even throughout the years, we've had to throw out thousands of dollars worth of methylene blue that didn't meet our specifications. And we've tested the top 10 brands on Amazon, and none of them meet specifications that they say on the label. They're either higher in heavy metals, which is often the case, or they're not as potent as they say on the label. We tested one the other day that said it was like 10 milligrams per drop, which a lot of these are liquids. It was actually 11% potent. So it only had 1 milligram of methylene blue in there compared to the label. And so we've seen things all over the map, but liquids tend to be the biggest culprit because they degrade pretty quickly and they're just messy as hell too. If you get liquid methylene blue on something, it is a stain, everybody. So methylene blue will stain clothing. It will stain countertops. So you have to be very careful. We make a very cool dosage form, a dose factor called the troche, which is a dissolvable lozenge. It's scored so that it's got the ability for you to cut it up into like quarter, half, 3/4, or full. And these lozenges were initially developed to dissolve in the mouth between your upper cheek and gum. But methylene blue is highly blue. So if you do that, your mouth is going to turn very blue. That's okay. If it's cool with you, it's going to work faster that way. But you can also swallow it on an empty stomach, and that works just as well because it's a very potent ingredient that gets through your GI system in an almost untouched way. That's called bioavailability. And so we have a couple other products that are better in the mouth, for example. But our pure methylene blue is called Just Blue, and it comes in a 16 milligram troche, the buccal troche that I just mentioned, and 4 milligrams of that is usually your starting dose. To have it in the morning, take it on an empty stomach, eat about 20 or 30 minutes later. If you don't feel much after a day or two, maybe 3, then go up on the dose. If you don't feel after 2 or 3 days, keep going up until you start feeling it. Because again, it shouldn't be something that you shouldn't be aware. You should be aware that you're taking something and that it's helping you in the ways that I described. Because once your mitochondria are working better energy, less brain fog, better motivation, better mood, less inflammation, usually less pain, all those things, depending on kind of where you're starting from.
Cool. And you'd say like, hey, someone's increasing the dose. At a certain point, probably increasing the dose is going overboard. Where's our I call normal ceiling for your average Joe?
Once you get to above about 16 milligrams, 1.6, then if you're not feeling much, I usually recommend working with a provider if you want to go up any higher. It's still pretty safe up to about, a milligram per kilogram, which is about 50 milligrams, 70 milligrams per day for most people. So you can certainly go up to that dosing without practitioner support, but I kind of recommend it. Usually, if you don't feel much at the time you get to 16, there's usually some other stuff you probably want to be looking at just to make sure there's no other reason why that might be the case. But usually by the time somebody gets to 16, our full troche size, they start feeling the effects. Usually it's at half of that. Usually at 8 milligrams is when people start feeling it. And the more optimized you get, the less you're going to need, interestingly. So in the beginning, you might need a full troche to feel like you have an effect. But as you get more optimized from a mitochondrial perspective, you'll need less to get the same effect, which is kind of a nice deal. And my thing here is that I'm not, I have a company that makes supplements. It's called Transcriptions, of course, but I also am a clinician and I care about doing my best to optimize mitochondrial function and peeling off the methylene blue as much as possible as I can over time. And then just using it as needed for performance or for brain fog or travel or hypoxic conditions, endurance, and things like that. And so my goal is to take people off of this as much as possible as they get more optimized.
Cool. You're giving me more questions, and I want to ask these last kind of similar questions, but related. You guys take like some amount of insurance, I guess, is one question that I had for you. And then 2, like, what would it cost out of pocket? Blaise is the 40-year-old or who's fallen asleep on the couch. And I'm like, oh, I want to start off. Like, what does it normally cost? Are we in the $100 a month ballpark? Like, where are we at?
So this is not a prescription. This is a direct to consumer. And so you can purchase it directly from our website at transcriptions.com. And so there is no insurance coverage for it. It's like a supplement, as you would take a vitamin or mineral or something like that if you were purchasing it from, GNC or, wherever you get your supplements from, that kind of thing. And as far as how much it's going to cost, it depends on how much you're taking and depends on how often you're taking it, right? If you're somebody that needs to be taking it on the regular basis for a period of time, if you're taking a half of a troche 30 days, that's probably going to cost you, there's about 8 doses per pack. It's going to probably cost you about $100 a month if you need that much. But hopefully over time you need less than that, right? And then, I think it's a benefit versus risk where I can get somebody feeling better much faster. And as a result of that, everything else gets easier. Then they suddenly are okay stopping the alcohol 4 times a week, or maybe going down to twice a week, right? They're okay getting to bed at 10 o'clock instead of 11:30 after, not doom scrolling for an hour and a half, right? And so you can make additional adjustments once you have more energy to do it. So I don't see it as $100 a month forever. I see it as something where if I can get somebody on this, get them feeling better, you feel better, then you're going to start doing the other things that are going to make you so you can use it less,
Yeah. Big rocks, little rocks, baby. I love it. Awesome, man. Scott, I really appreciate you coming on. I know I had a ton of questions for you, and I appreciate your being able to nerd out with us about some of these health things. It was really great having you. If you guys want to check him out, I'm going to leave his website, ways to connect with you. Do you want to give yourself a quick plug for your social media or ways that people could connect with you and ask you questions if they have any?
Sure. Yeah. So my personal website is my name, Dr. Scott Sherr, DrScottSherr.com. Simple enough. You can find information on my health optimization medicine consulting, both my companies as well. My company Transcriptions. I have another company called One Base Health that's involved in technology and hyperbaric medicine specifically. And then I have a nonprofit as well that trains practitioners. So you can find it all there. If you're looking to find me on the socials, you can find me at Dr. Scott Sherr, my name as well. And it's also at Transcriptions is the name of the company. And there's tons of information on Transcriptions website, transcriptions.com. If you're looking to dive more into the science here is one. I've done a decent amount of podcasts and media on them, trying to really get the word out there about just educating. And that's what I care about in the end.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate it, man. We'll definitely leave it all in the podcast description. That way people can find you. Appreciate you again for coming. And with that, remember, you don't stop playing because you get old. You get old because you stop playing. We'll see you guys next time. Peace.